I'm Guelda Redman. My son Kai is 28 years old and he was diagnosed with schizophrenia 10 years ago. You know, he was just the sweetest little kid. He was very quiet, was not a hard child in any sense. And he was that way for quite a while. Like he was just always, like everybody loved Kai. He had these cute little blue eyes and the little white blonde hair. He was easygoing with anybody. He was just a really nice little kid. He liked to draw a lot and he's amazing at Lego. As he got a little bit older, he would also do drawing and he would love to he would get me to cut paper up and then staple it together so that it was in like a little book form. And then he would just go through and he would draw and write like a little story, but in drawings. He could express himself really well through that. When he was about 5 years old, there were a couple of times where he cried at night and I went in and he said, "They won't be quiet." And I was like, "Who won't be quiet?" And he said, "There's just voices, they won't be quiet." And I think ever since then, even though I've been told several times it probably had nothing to do with anything, that ever since then, I've always really kind of watched him. And so to me, when I saw things happening, I knew it was more. I would say it was kind of the early teen years. As he got into his teen years, he started just being a little more defiant, which isn't that unusual, but it was unusual for him. He wasn't hanging out with friends anymore. He wasn't listening to his teachers. One of the things he dropped was he didn't want to go to his art classes. And that was weird because he's an artist. He stopped playing his guitars. He's like so many things that he just quit doing. And I could see, I mean, he was unhappy. I think that as a mom, you know your child, right? And teenage angst or behavior, it wasn't something I wasn't prepared for or didn't kind of expect. But his was so out of character that I just knew. I think a lot of it was mother's intuition. And I would take him to a counselor because I knew there was a struggle. And the counselors kept saying, "Oh, he's just being a normal teenage boy." For me, it was like, no, but that's not my son. I know that's not my son. I know there's something going on. There's something going on. He was living in Chilliwack with his cousin, sharing an apartment. And one of the things with Kai at this point in time was that his hygiene was terrible. And his hygiene in his apartment was terrible as well. And so he and his cousin were really struggling with that. He came home. We get up in the morning, we're going and we're doing our stuff. And I go downstairs to do laundry and there's Kai, he's laying on the bed and he's just laying there staring at the ceiling and he looks absolutely just, anybody who knows somebody with and I hear this from a lot of other parents, is that you can tell from the eyes. They're like haunted. They're haunted eyes. And he just was laying there with these eyes. And I was just, what's going on? And he said, "I need help." I knew he was struggling. I knew that, but I had no idea to what extent it was. I kept saying, "Kai, do you hear voices?" And he always said no. And then finally he admitted and he said, "Mom, you know how you keep asking me if I hear voices?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I do." So at that point, I'm like, now what do I do? I have no idea what to do for you. In my head, I'm thinking, well, it's a brain thing. So I need to find, you know, like a psychologist or something for him. I had no idea that I needed to go to the GP. I had no idea. And this is one of the things that frustrates me, is that I had no idea what to do. The first time that he ended up in the hospital, he was down in his room and he was cutting himself. He had a knife and he was just kind of not doing like deep cuts, just kind of like he was carving something in his arm. And I saw him doing that and I said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Okay, you know what? You need to go to the hospital, right?" And he said, "I'm not going." And so I said, "Well, you are gonna go. If you won't go, I'll phone the ambulance." So he basically got up, went outside, got in his truck and drove away. At that point, I didn't realize that you can't just call an ambulance and they'll come and get your mentally ill child. I found out that you have to actually call the RCMP. So we called the RCMP and we told them what was going on. They went and he had parked down by the Fraser River. And when they got there, he was coming out of the Fraser River. He had been up to at least up to his knees. This is in January. Immediately at that point, it was, you have to go to the hospital. It was obvious that he was, if not trying to hurt himself, hoping that it would happen. It was terrifying. And you sit in emergency for like 24 hours waiting for a bed. And we just stayed, everyone saying, "Go home, go home." It was like, we just couldn't do it. We couldn't leave him alone. It was terrifying. And still at that point thinking, just the fear of not knowing what was gonna happen. Would this ever get better? Yeah. Would we ever get our son back? Where was our son? You really honestly feel like you've lost your child. Our social worker basically said, "You have to tell them you're not taking him home. You have to force it," basically. And so that's what we did. We would go and visit him and the nurses would come out and they'd say, "Well, Kai would like to come home this weekend with you." And we would go, "No, we won't take him. We can't take him." And we just kept saying, no. We knew that if we started taking him, the system would push him back out. And so we basically had to just look him in the eye and say, "We won't take you home anymore." It was hard, but I truly, truly, truly believed that if I didn't do that, he'd be dead. So everywhere he was, I would go visit him at least once during the week, depending on how close he was. And we would go together every weekend and spend hours with him. Every time I walked out of a building without him, I would just cry. We would cry all the way home. It was the hardest thing that we've ever had to do. I mean, if we weren't absolutely positive that he would not live without us doing this, it wouldn't have been something that we could do. When your child gets ill with something like that, your immediate reaction is, "Oh my gosh, what did I do wrong?" And that's a terrifying thought. There's this huge, just racking guilt weight on your shoulders. And going through these education series and talking to people and learning that it's not necessarily anything that I did. It's what your vulnerability is to it when you're born. It's a bit of genetics, it's traumas, it's, all these different things all together. And realizing that I didn't cause this was such a huge relief to me and to my husband that, we didn't make him sick. The education was huge. And then also to be able to share all of that knowledge then with our family members. I have a fairly large family. Mark has family, he's got 2 siblings and I have 6 siblings, and our parents. having that support, I don't know that you could do it on your own. I think that, you know, having them just reassuring us that we were doing the right thing. And the social workers too, you know, saying you're doing the right thing, you're doing the right thing. You know, there's one thing that I've never done is I've never not told somebody that Kai has schizophrenia. It's not something I am ashamed of. For me, it never even occurred to me to not tell people, to be honest. It's a reality, and I always figure knowledge is power, and I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed of it. It's amazing what that kid has gone through. Donating to the BC Schizophrenia Society, you're donating to so many different facets of what's needed. So you're donating for like supportive family, for education, and for research. Research especially. Let's get rid of this. Let's just like, we want this gone. I want never anybody else ever to feel what I felt when I found out that my child was in the Fraser River considering suicide. Once he was in some of these treatment center places, especially UBC, they got his medications under control, and we would go visit him. And I can't remember the exact moment, but I remember just this sense of, oh my gosh, he smiled. And thinking, wow. Like, can you imagine just a smile? The fact that he just showed a little bit of expression. I mean, it wasn't even a laugh. It was, he showed a little bit of expression in his face. And I was like, wow. So, and then at that point I thought, oh yeah, he's there. And then the first time he laughed again, right? It was like, or that he cracked a joke or something like that. I mean, he doesn't crack jokes very often, but sometimes, you know, he's got this quirky little smile. It's like, it's very kind of one-sided, like a, you know, but he'll sort of say something, and then his gets his smile on, and it's just like, oh, I love that smile. I see Kai now. Yeah. The difference in where he was and where he is today, I had no idea if I'd get my Kai back. I had no idea. I had to kind of, in a way, I guess, make myself okay with it if it didn't happen. But I kept fighting for him, and I have him back. He's not 100%, but he is, you know, he's smiling again. He laughs. My daughter, like I said, has two little ones, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And oh my gosh, they love him, and he loves them. From a person who couldn't even smile for a while, had no expression, had the darkest, most haunted eyes that I've ever seen in a person, to someone now who smiles and hugs and, you know, picks up his little niece and will be carrying her around, and his little nephew, and, you know, never ever give up. Never give up.